etc.
Yeah, so we are live after a short delay. Hey guys, I would like to introduce Afsa, not from Balancer anymore, but from ENS, Ethereum name service. Um, Again, Alex, congratulations on getting so many votes on ENS. I love the project, and I'm looking forward to seeing your input.
Thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, and
So,
glad to have you here again.
okay, so I'm opening the presentation. So before I'm gonna just say a few words about myself. Okay, so I worked for a year. I I started working at the Ethereum Foundation in 2014. Then I left in 2018 to start my own project, Unilogin. From that, I worked for a year at Balancer. And right now, I'm not at Balancer anymore. I am dedicating myself to ENS and other like public good projects. But I would like to talk about my experience at Balancer because I was not a designer there. I was a like user researcher, and I think it's a very interesting experience to be. It was out of my comfort zone, and I think every project really should have their own like user research side because perfect. I think I am opening my presentation. So
Yeah,
I
I can
think
see
every
that your
project should
presentation
have
is
a
ready.
user researcher. And the reason you should have a user researcher is that really like the goal of user researching is just understanding what you are and who you are and just trying to look at your app from a fresh from just having fresh eyes. You would be surprised how often you talk to people just by talking to the users of your app you will always get feedback and new ideas that you didn't have before. And I think and often you are so focused on okay, play slideshow. You're so focused on having on like because you know everything about your presentation, about your app, about how it works technically. Sometimes you just miss like the big picture, and I think it's very important. And first of all, like what is user researcher, right? Okay, perfect. I think my presentation is working. Can you,
Okay.
Anton, can you see it?
Yeah, I'll give you the stage.
Okay,
I'll see you once you're done.
okay, perfect. So like my presentation is how to talk to users at your app. Like it's similar to talking to girls at parties. And I think it's funny because like I think like I was always a nerd. I never was able. I always saw myself as an introspect, both in like social settings and professional ones. And then for this year, what I did for my year at Balancer, I basically just talked to people and talked to people and talked to people one after the other. And so user research, user experience, and user interface, they are a cycle in a way, right? So basically, user interface is the thing you build, the thing you look at. And then you can get that, you test that by just doing user research. User research is mostly just look, this is an app. Let's try to see how users look at it and how users understand that. And then that helps you understand how is your actual experience. Are users actually seeing the things you expected them to see? Are users actually like is there like are they understanding your app the way you are trying to understand? And from that, you get feedback, you understand more, and then you go back to build your UI. And then you build your UI and you test it again. So it's a circle. It's a great cycle where you build your UI, you test it with users, that helps shape the experience and understand what's happening, and then you use that experience to build your UI again. So why? Why is that important? And I would say that the most important thing is that there is this facepalm moment. At every time I ever had, I interviewed over 50 people, I think. Like I saw hours and hours of face-to-face interviews and recorded interviews. And on every single one of them, there was a moment that I was like, oh my God, I didn't actually like realize that. Like that is a very useful feedback that those guys are giving me because they have no understanding about my app. And I think that's super important. And it's not like a face palm like this, it's more like a face on your forehead thing. And the most important thing I would say is I should disable my live. I think the main issue here, I'm trying to do a live video here, but that's okay. So here's the thing. I've been working on user research. Like, I've been working on UI for years. I am a designer. I am a user experience. But I think anyone can do it, really. I think the engineers, like you as a designer can do it, an engineer can do it. Anyone should be able to do user research in your company. And one of the tips, user research is really just getting your app to people and then like walking through your app. But it's really like not you explaining them. That's a very common thing. People, like, usually when a founder wants to show someone their app or just trying, they will give like a long talk before explaining everything. But your users will not have that. Your real users will just be probably searching or like finding your app somehow. So you need to just let them, like, you want to see them struggle. You don't want to be helping them, right? You're not going to tell them, look, this is my app, this is how it works, let me show you how it does. You need to be very distant on that and just show them a link and ask them, okay, describe what you see. What do you think this app does? What do you think this app can do? Like, can you try to do this? Do you think that this can be achieved in this website? Things like that. Also, never use the same words that you have in your app language, right? So if you have a button saying add liquidity and you ask your users, can you add liquidity? Of course, they're going to go to the button saying add liquidity, but you need to describe tasks to them in a way that they don't necessarily, that they need to think, right? You want to put money in this app. How do you go to doing that? You want to create something new. You want to do A, B, and C. And you need to describe those things. And also remind that the users are not being tested. Your app is the one being tested. Your app is the one that is under stress. So let them relax. So just say, instead of asking them, can you do this? Can you find that? Just tell them, do you think this app allows you to do that? Do you think this app will enable you to do that? And if it doesn't, it's not the user's fault, it's your fault, it's the app's fault. I think it's very important for them to understand the difference. So I'm gonna go through a few offline tools that are the classic ways that people usually did user research, like back when offices existed. First, paper prototype. I've done a lot of paper prototypes like a long time ago, and it's fun because it's really like just draw something, print something, show them to people like face to face, and it's great because you can do a lot of like interaction without actually having to code anything, because mostly you're just, okay, this is an app and people know that it's very like rough because they're seeing it, and you just ask them, okay, what would you do? And then they like sort of click the buttons there on the paper, and then you just swap the papers around and put things over and change papers, and then you create a sort of interactivity that just understands the flow better. And of course, there is the classic usability study where you get 10 people in a room, maybe with a recording, maybe with a two-way mirror, and then you just show them the stuff, and then you ask them questions. And it's complicated and it's fancy, and you can hire like great teams to do that. But I think there are other ways in which you can do that, that are online, that are faster, that you can integrate in your process a lot easier. And let's go through them. So first of all, design prototypes. Everyone can do it those days. If you have Figma, you can do prototypes. Sketch, Figma, InVision. I think even Illustrator and Photoshop and things like that. What is a prototype? A prototype is nothing more than a few screens that you will be able to click around, depending on your. It's basically a slideshow, a clickable slideshow, and depending on your tool, sometimes you have like scrollable headers, you have animations. They can be more fancy or less fancy, but just those basic things, they're great because you can design something, and before you spend 2 weeks building them, you can just go over and figure out if they make sense. Then once you have that, schedule meetings. You can do that with Calendly, like just ask people to join your Calendly and just join your Google Hangouts or something like that. Usually you do like try to offer rewards, maybe $20 for like in a like a $20 discount of something, or maybe like an NFT. I've tried a lot of things. So case study. So I like Balancer when I joined Balancer, we had a big like change that we did. Before the change went live, I tested with dozens of people. Like a lot of people we were just going through them, just asking users, and that's a classic thing. You show the user something, and then like they are talking to you, and you're in your Google Hangout meetings, and all you're doing is asking them questions, saying, what do you think this is? Do you have experience with that? Have you heard about this? If do you think this is possible? If that's possible, click around. And I can't stress how good it is to see that, because every time people will help you see your app in a different way. Almost like all the engineers I talk to, they know exactly what to click and how to click and how the app works and all the difference between them. But if you just show a user the first time, they'll make mistakes you never thought of. So this is the most basic thing. Just get someone somehow on a Google Meetup and then show them your website. That's really as straightforward as that. Another way you can do that is just have pre-recorded meetings, and I think UserBrain is a great tool for that. It's a wonderful tool. Basically, you give them a script, and they have like their own users that they will find you, that they will get you to do stuff. And it's so good because the advantage of UserBrain is that like in 20 minutes, from the time you like wake, like you can prepare something. Maybe you prepare a clickable prototype. Maybe you have a real website. All you need is a link. Like you give them a link and you give them a script of, I want you to try to do this. I want you to try to do that. And then you can see them clicking around. And it's very, very, very fast. Like often you would just prepare the thing, get the link, prepare the script, send it around. I would go like stand up, go have a coffee or go to the bathroom or just eat a snack. By the time I got back, I had 2 or 3 videos of users using the product, which I could immediately try and test and immediately get feedback. And it's great if you're in design phase, because then you can do a single test and then design a little bit and then do a single test. And that cycle that I've shown you where you really accelerates, because you can build the UI very quickly, test it, understand the user experience, go and rebuild the UI, maybe just in a prototype, and then you can evolve that very, very fast. And it's so important. Warning though, and I think that's funny, sometimes it's hard for you to get people to trust you, right? Because as a UX researcher, you are doing often a lot of things that a scammer would be doing, right? You're contacting people on the internet, telling them that they can get easy money, like just click this link and record this, or maybe talk to me and I will pay you $50. Like they are gonna ask you to click on shady links. In my case, it was just like UserBrain links or Calendly links. But often people don't know the difference, right? And like, can you download this? Can I watch you? Can I record you? The only thing that I don't do as a user researcher that a scammer will do is want to see your password, right? That's the funny thing. like be aware of that. Respect people's privacy. They might be like hard to trust you, and that's normal, right? And like just go around that. The way I went around that was simply that I like people trusted me, and I would use my main account and tell people, hey, this is the things I will never do. I will never show you like secret phrase, confirm with me, etc. I think it's important. Like give them rewards. One of the tests I did, all I did is give people an NFT that I scribble an NFT in there's an app that does this. I forgot the name, but it's a wonderful little app that you just scribble something, you turn it into an NFT, and I just gave it to people. And funny enough, I think that a lot of people were more attracted to having this funny like scribble than they were at getting $20 or maybe even like $50. It's sometimes incentivization is not about the money, it's about just the game. And I think you keep that in mind. Another great tool that I've used a lot, 5-second tests. 5-second test is when you just show a user an image and then for 5 seconds, and then it disappears, and then you get to ask a bunch of questions on that. Is the sound working? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. I think the sound is working. Okay, perfect. So a great example of 5-second test is that we were also about to launch a new app, and like on all the versions of Balancer, I did a 5-second test on the home page, on the main page, on the design page, and I asked users things like, hey, like just take a look at 5 seconds, what this is later, right? And people who have never heard about Balancer. And a lot of people will tell you a lot of answers, and then like you can make a word cloud of it, and you can understand that a lot of people would understand, oh, it's a crypto thing, it's an investment thing. Is that a stock or a portfolio thing? It's not, right? It's not like Balancer is not an investment or a portfolio or a stock thing, but it's about crypto. But it's just seeing those lines, people would understand, and you can understand, okay, am I talking the right language, right? People might not be able to remember exactly everything, but they can get a feeling. And that's very important. You will make a first impression on the users in less than a second. So 5 seconds is a lot of time to have a first impression that just tells you things like, are they gonna trust me, right? Is this a trustworthy website? Things like that. Another version that is very similar to the 5 seconds is the first click. Same thing, you show them an image and you just ask them, click somewhere, like click anywhere, click where you think it would be good for you. And I did that with the old homepage on Balancer, with the new homepage, with multiple tests of the homepage. And I would just ask them like, look at this and then click anywhere that you would like to feel interesting. And things, you can figure out small things like so the first 2 images there were homepage designs that we are testing, and the third image is really like the homepage that we had. And you can see that one simple test is like, what gets more clicks, the illustration or the weird graphic? That not necessarily is a good thing, because a lot of people were clicking on the graphic expecting, whenever we show them like a screenshot or something that looks like a graph, people were clicking them expecting it to be taken to a real working with real data. And you don't want to frustrate your user. So sometimes making an illustration that is obvious on an illustration is good, right? I mean, it's nice because you get an idea, oh, people are really interested in going here or that. So first click reports are very useful. I usually combine them. I show them a 5-second test, and then I ask them a bunch of questions, and then I do a first click. Navigation test is a little bit like a first click, but instead of just having one image that you click, you have a series of images, and you only have like, it's almost like a very basic prototype that only has one way, right? You need to click here or else in order to get that. And I made a comparison using Uniswap and Balancer V1, Uniswap that was V2 back then, just showing like the swap interface. And I just took a bunch of screenshots of users doing a single task, let's say selling one Ether and buying one wrapped Bitcoin. And I wanted to understand how many of them would get lost in the middle. And you can see that the image on the image on the left, there are a lot of people clicking elsewhere. They're clicking on a button that was not very important. They're clicking on the middle. They're clicking a lot of other places. And you're losing those users. Those are users that are confused. Maybe they would eventually find, but just clicking around means it's a bad thing. While on Uniswap, you could see that most users were clicking on the area they wanted them to click. So, so this navigation test is it's very useful. Another great way in which did that is we had a liquidity widget, which is like one of the most important things you can do on Balancer is we want you to add liquidity. And I wanted to and there were many ways in which you could add liquidity. And doing the user test revealed that people were very confused on this, right? They couldn't understand how to do it. So I made a bunch of variants, compare it with the release candidate, and could understand that, hey, look, people were clicking all around, like they are clicking on the slider when I want to then click elsewhere. And then I could see that with the variant, I could increase 50% amount of people that were happy, that were clicking on the correct places, right? We did a lot of work on the liquidity widgets and figuring out how exactly people would be adding liquidity. So sometimes you can do that, not to test something, but really just to create a game. One of the things I wanted to understand is we have pools, right? We have pools everywhere. And our question was, how can we reduce the pool icon? Can we create a pool icon that represents pool tokens and pool icons in a way that even when it's reduced like to a very tiny thing, people can still understand? And what I did is I created a Find the Die game, which basically is a captcha game in which you always need to click the pool that has the die icon. An interesting thing is that it starts just having like a die icon, and then I use the die in this sort of spiral using two colors, and then I kept like making the icon smaller and smaller and smaller until all we had is the color. And I was able to understand that people, after that training, they were able to understand that a token could be represented simply by a two color gradient. And that was very, very, and it proved that we could do a pool icon that was very reducible and could create a sense of branding. We never ended using those pool icons, but it was a great test nonetheless. Another great tool that I think that will depend on the type of designer you have, but sometimes you can design with code, and I think Framer is a wonderful tool for that. Framer is basically like a prototyper for designers, but that slowly will allow you to basically build anything up to the point in which you can build some very like simple code. And I think, like, again, when we were thinking about like the liquidity widget, which is, okay, how do you add liquidity? And it was complicated because sometimes you want to add all the tokens you have. Maybe sometimes you want to add it thinking in terms of dollar value. Sometimes you wanted to add them based on how much of the tokens you have. Maybe you want to add 50% or 10% of all the tokens you had, right? So I had the realization that maybe like all of those are just the same scale, right? Like if you have like one BTC, then everything goes from 0 to 100%. It's just either showing percent, dollars, or token amount. So I thought maybe we can create a sort of like a slider that you can either click or slide. And it was like a nice concept. I wasn't sure if it could be worked. I made it in Framer in a way that you could click either way or type or just scroll or rotate. And it sort of worked. It was clever, but also we could understand that like there was so much confusion on where exactly do you click, when do you scroll, when do you use the mouse wheel, that we decided not, we didn't even need to build that in order to try it out. Like we built a very basic prototype just using a little bit of code. And another example is then we went to build something completely different that you could just type. One of the issues is that you can have like there are two modes in which you can add liquidity, and you can use wow if your assets are proportional or not, and that's a little bit complex, and I'm going to go through that. But we ended up creating a solution that was very smart about it, and we wanted to test. Look, if you add more, that would basically detect how much you added in one token, and would then suggest to you how much you could add on the other, or have like a toggle. And that toggle was really helpful in us just having the working prototype that you could click around was very helpful, because we could really understand better, and then we could use that prototype to test with people on Userbrain, on Calendly, on Google Meetings, and things like that. That's why those tools are always combined. We never actually use that particular solution, because we then realized maybe there was a completely new different solution that where you, instead of just having a liquid, there's a whole new flow in which you click invest, and then you select which tokens you're seeing. Unfortunately, like this particular recording, there's a lot of like white bugs. I'm not sure what happened there. I think that the after I tested, the code broke. But we tested a lot of things. We even tested things like what if you could see the fees going up live on the page, right? Those are things that you cannot really describe on a standard design, but when you could see, we created a website that was sort of live, a design that was live, and you could see like the fees going up, and then you suddenly understand, oh, I understand. So if I put money in, I can see my money going up, so I want to put more money. And that was very useful. That design was sort of used in the final version, but a lot of it was just a learning experience. So general insights, and I think that everyone should be able to apply in their own project. First of all, two options are never equal. I think that's so important. I saw that one like over and over and over and over, like where you have something that never try to reflect the system, like reflect the user needs. What do I mean by that? So let's say that you have a scenario where a user wants to do an action, but you're inside in your system, there are two modes. They can use the Tweedledee mode or the Tweedledum mode, right? And there's a very technical reason why those modes are different. Like you're going to talk to your engineer, and they're going to explain how clever it is that you can use Tweedledee or Tweedledum, right? But users don't really know like what those things are, and your UI should never just reflect the internal schematics, right? So this first step that a lot of engineers will do is just replicate that, right? You just click something that says select mode, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and that is terrible. That's terrible because you're not explaining to your users what those are. And of course, like you can try to select the default, and that's still bad, right? Maybe you choose a mode and there's like two radio buttons, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Those two options, either a drop down or a radio mode, those are usually bad because you're not exactly explaining to the user what those two options mean or why they matter. So the first thing you notice is that probably one of the options is more useful for users. Maybe it's the one that you use more. Maybe it's the one that brings more value. Maybe it's the one that 90% of users will want to use because that's sort of like the scenario in which the other mode is useful is not that common, right? So if that's the case, just maybe use a checkbox. But the problem is that you just say use Tweedledum mode, your user will not understand that. And what a lot of people do is just add like a tooltip, and that tooltip will have like a technical language saying Tweedledum mode. But here's the thing, and you're gonna see that if you do user testing. Users do not read that. Users do not care about that. They will not click on that. Even when I was asking them what is the Tweedledum mode, they will just go sort of look that and try to read and repeat that back to me. And you could see they were not like really understanding, and they really didn't care. So instead of just using, maybe to explain in a few words, maybe say keep assets in the same proportion, right? I don't know, like just try to figure out what is the Tweedledee and Tweedledum, what do they mean for the users. But you can do maybe even better, like be smarter, maybe detect what the user has, what the user doesn't have. And one of the things we did is that instead of having a toggle saying Tweedledee mode, we just could detect by seeing what the users are doing. We could see, oh, probably if they switched modes would be better for them. So one of the things we tested was, hey, we could just show an alert saying, hey, click here to fix that problem. Like you are doing something that if you just click here, the price will be $20 better, right? Or you save in gas fees or whatever, right? And then suddenly it's not like an option anymore. And sometimes another thing I see is that maybe sometimes you have like 4 options because you have multiple choices and the user needs to consider them. And maybe instead of being an option, just integrate that in the flow. So maybe you have a button that is withdraw. So instead of having like an option and then you click withdraw, just make there's a main button saying withdraw and unwrap, and a secondary button saying withdraw wrapped. That's the same as you just selecting a mode and then clicking withdraw, but you're just saying whatever it is that you want to say on the action button. Those are 2 options you can always consider. Another thing I saw all the time, unknown is not 0. Don't try to tell the users what they can do. Often you see that users would go into a website, they were not logged in, and like, here's the thing, as a tester, as an engineer, as someone building, you are always logged into the system. You're always connected on your wallet. You always have the right tokens in order to test. Your users will not. Your users will arrive in a wallet. They don't have the wallets. They don't have the tokens. They are not connected. It's not working for them. And then you're going to tell them because instead of, and often, and because you don't know what they have, a lot of systems assume that they have 0 amounts of tokens, and then they want, let's say, scenario, you go to Uniswap and then you want to see how much is the Ether price, you type 1 Ether. Uniswap doesn't know how much Ether you have because it assumes you have 0, and instead of showing you the price, imagine it shows you a big error saying you don't have enough Ether. And the user they will probably not connect to your account just so they can know how much Ethers, like how much you're buying Ethers for. They're probably just gonna switch and go to the other website, right? I saw that often and often and often all the time, where user would see an error message, and the only reason that error message was there is that we were assuming that because we didn't know something, because something that was still loading, something was still unknown, so data was not retrieved, that data was 0, right? And then the user would see an error. Another thing, instead of telling them what something is, just show them, right? So if you have, like, if let's say you can only, like, you want to do an auction, some sort of action, and the user only have 10 tokens, and then you could maybe, like, they put 12 tokens there on the thing. You can add an alert them, an error message saying, hey, you have more tokens than you should have, or you need to select the fee or whatever. Instead of doing that, just show them something different, right? Just highlight that they have too much tokens, and then just crop it out automatically and put it and make it so that they have the maximum amount of tokens that they have, right? Fix the error for them. Often we had this thing where we would, like, again, the proportional mode is something that we had a lot in Balancer, where there were two modes. Sometimes you can invest in a pool by just putting like $1 of Ether and $1 in Bitcoin, or you can put $2 of Ether and $0 in Bitcoin, and then we had this mode that would allow you to make it proportional. But here's the cool thing. Once we have a toggle that would do that automatically to users, they would understand it. They could see, oh, I dragged this thing here, and this other thing also drags. I don't understand the mode. I don't need to read the tooltip, but suddenly I can see things moving. On the other hand, if you do that too much, they're going to click around. They're going to see, oh my God, I'm going to put this thing here, and then there's an alert there. I'm going to click the alert. It's going to fix something on the top, and then I can pull this other slider to the top, and then this other slider is going to move. And I know that because I tested. I saw it happening with users. What often happens is that they will have less errors because you're doing everything for them. But if you ask them, I'm sorry, what did happen there? You clicked something and then what happened? They're gonna tell you, I don't know. I just know that there was a warning. I clicked the warning, something changed, and then I don't know, right? I just know I clicked this button, and now these two sliders are locked, and I don't know what's happening, but I understand the sliders are locked. Sometimes that's good because you're reducing errors. Sometimes you actually want users to understand what you're doing. So just keep that in consideration. I think it's just consider. Another example, invest versus trade. Like if you go to Balancer, a lot of you see that there's this big word saying invest or trade. Check with users what they understand, because every time I ask users what they understood as invest versus trade was very different than what we were talking about invest and trade. Invest in Balancer and for a lot of DeFi is put your money in this and let it get yield. Trade means you swap one token for the other. While for most users, invest is something that they do long term, in the sense that they I'm gonna put this and then I'm gonna wait for a year. And trade is something that they do for a quick profit. And a great example of that is, for a lot of users, buying Bitcoin or buying Ether was an investment. So if you tell them, I want you to buy one wrapped Bitcoin, they would say, oh, okay, I want to invest in Bitcoin then. And they would click invest, when what you wanted them is to go for trade. So try and understand what users, how users understand your words. Also, try to make your page alive. Users like to see other users. That's something that I didn't realize, and I think that's super interesting to see. So we had just a pool, a list of actions that were happening on the pools, and we didn't think a lot about it, because it was just a list of actions. Someone invested, someone withdrew, someone invested, someone withdrew. Our users love to look at it. One user said that he loved to look and refresh to see when people would swap using that tool, because he knew that whenever someone swapped, that money was he was getting more fees. I saw a user saying things like, oh no, a lot of people are withdrawing from that tool. Maybe it's a bad choice. Maybe I should not put my money here, because a lot of people are taking money out. And I had a lot of people just not understand the page. It seemed like a straightforward page. A lot of people thought they were suggestions, action, where you could invest 7 ethers or withdraw 50 ethers, right? And those are action buttons. I even had a user saw that there was someone had invested, withdrawn 100 DAI and then invested 1 million DAI or something like that. And he thought that was sort of the DAI price. And he was like, oh my God, you see someone invested a one DAI at $100, took it out at $1 million, they're rich now. Of course, that's not how it works. So one of the things we tested was, what if it just made the pool look more like a social style feed? Also, I realized that just by looking at the users, I could about 30% of them were using like ENS names and ENS avatars. So we started just thinking, what if you show that? And it looks so much better because now suddenly it looks like a social media site where you can see, oh, people are putting money, taking money out. It looks less like a table and more like your Twitter. Also, numbers are UI. Users will think about prices and in a way that you might not realize. Things like they see two options and they maybe think, okay, I'm gonna pick this because it's cheaper. I don't understand which are of this. Or maybe they are gonna see three numbers. They don't understand these three numbers, but they understand that if you multiply A with B, it becomes C, and then they understand, okay, that's what it is. And also, like design for all screens, I saw places where people would open like a huge screen, and I think that was like we didn't think about that. Like know who your customers are. Like oftentimes I saw like an engineer in my team saying, no, or users understand this because I've talked to them in Discord, and then I would talk to users that were not in Discord, and they had no idea what some users don't knew. You don't need to explain cryptocurrency anymore. Most users I've met, even without outside this crypto sphere, knew about. Like you would tell them that they didn't really understand cryptocurrency, but they had bought some on Coinbase, right? So I think that's really fantastic. And but of course, like DeFi, they still need explaining, and that's something that Balancer is still like that's something that was existing in Balancer V1, and we still do, which is like sometimes you can like put one token on top of another, and then you can make a pool of that is on Yearn and using like three DeFi protocols, and in the end you have like a pool made of LUSD, C3, CZRV, like a word that like a word salad nobody understands. That's hard. Like, how do you convey that to users? That's a hard case, right? Also, like figuring out how to do multi-chain UI. That is hard. That is something that we didn't know. Uh, Gray patterns, like sometimes not solving a problem is a problem. And I think a great example of that, and I think after this is we're almost wrapping up, it's impermanent loss. I spend a lot of time in Balancer just trying to figure out how do we show impermanent loss to users. And the end result was that we don't need to, right? You don't users don't actually care about impermanent loss. What they care about is how much money they make in the end. And that's very confusing to know from in any of the DeFi apps because what they want, because there's APR, there's APY, and then sometimes it's shown in the numbers, like based on the numbers of tokens that you have, based on some in the dollars. In the end, what the users wanted, and I think that worked best in the user test, was if you had put $100 in this investment thing 30 days ago, this is how much you would have. And then we could show this is how much you would have, like the dotted line is this is how much you would have if you just didn't put the money on. And all the like the green lines where this is how much you have plus the fees that you got, plus the staking rewards that you got, plus the subsidy that it gave you. And then on the top, that's how much you get, right? And that was the best way we had to explain our product because suddenly it made sense. And I think Balancer evolved a lot in the years I was there. Like I don't take the credit. We have like a great design team, like Pon, Katera, Gareth, Avni, Lawrence, Mike. A lot of people are great. I was again just seeing what users were understanding about it, and I think but still, it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and thank you for that. You can find me at ABSA or just evsa.if. And thank you.
I was muted. Alex, thank you so much for sharing your experience with Balancer. It's amazing to see how much value user research and good UX can add to the product.
Damian, your voice was a little bit, like the audio came a little bit slow. Can you repeat the question?
I'm gonna give the
Anthony,
stage
sorry.
to Damian. I'm gonna give the stage to Damian. Alex, thank you so much for your presentation.
All right. Hello. It was really nice presentation about the UX, and I don't know if you wanted to introduce me, but sorry, I just started.
Yeah, Damian from Oasis. But
Yeah.
yeah, since you started, the stage is yours, and yeah, tell us more about the developer experience.
Right. Yeah. So we just heard about the other side of things that I'm working on because I'm a full stack developer at Oasis. We heard about the UX, and right now I would like to tell you a little bit about the other side of the applications, on the how can we improve the developers' experience of our applications. Yeah, so let's start with me. My name is Damian, and I'm working at Oasis. And at Oasis, we provide an interface, or actually, we started as a gateway to Maker protocol, and currently we are developing another products around it, and also trying to integrate to other protocols as well. And let's go back to the presentation. So whenever I hear about how can we improve the developer experience, first thing that will come to my mind will be for sure to introduce TypeScript. I hope a lot of people already know TypeScript. I think it's already common language out there. But for those who don't know it, it's like a type layer for your JavaScript applications. And thanks to that, we get this additional documentation of your code. It helps us to build more robust software where you don't have to worry about some really easy bugs like maybe typos and so on and so on. And besides that, it also gives us a great selection of some tools that integrates to your IDE, or so you have better, for example, IntelliSense and so on, so on. So for sure, it's a great tool that I would recommend to improve your workflow and the development experience. But we are at the 0x presentation conference, or whatever we call it, the meetup. Yeah. So we will be talking how can we improve the development experience of our decentralized apps. So when we were starting using TypeScript, a lot of the libraries already come with predefined types. Or if they don't have, we can find them on some definitely type repository where some people can post typings for libraries that you can find on the npm. But what should we do when we interact with the smart contracts? We don't have any repository like that. So, for example, first thing we could, like on the presentation, try to duck type the interfaces. For example, right here we can see that we're trying to add a balance of function that will return the balance of given address on the DAI contract. It's not the best solution. We can still make errors here, especially, for example, when the methods require a lot of parameters, and especially when, for example, you get a list of parameters which are all strings, and you have to know what exactly which each string means. So what can we use? And what actually we will use to figure out what methods are available on, for example, this DAI contract. So we would use, for this case, an ABI. This is like a human readable representation of contract that makes the communication between your code and the EVM easier. And over there, you will see all the, among others, all the methods, signatures available. And thanks to that, we can duck type the interface. But what if we could just use the ABI for generating the entire interfaces for the smart contracts? That would be really cool. And already great guys at Dev Crypto already implemented such a thing. There's this cool tool called if SDK. This library helps us to create entire SDK for our smart contracts, and it's super easy to work with the smart contract after that. It works out of the box. It just needs a small configuration file, and also it leverages the power of other library, the type chain, also by the Dev Crypto. And and yeah. So as I mentioned, this is really opinionated library that comes with everything you need. You just take it out and use it. So let's see how this configuration file for the if SDK would look like. So it's just a simple object where you can define the networks that you are using. In this case, we will use the mainnet, and you can define the contracts that you want to interact with. There's a DAI and WEF, for example, in this case. And in the next step, the library will just generate the SDK for you. It will fetch all the ABIs from the Etherscan, and also generate client and put it into your node modules, so you can use it later on. And let's see how the use case of this library looks like. So as mentioned, the SDK will end up in your package.json, and so you can import it as standard library. And as mentioned also before, the SDK is using Ether.js, and you cannot replace it. It's just as it is. And in order to create the SDK, you will need to provide the signer from to create the SDK. And here in the example, we will see that we will be connecting to some local network. It's just forked mainnet, and we're using some private key that was imported. But you can create the signer in whichever, like you can, for example, use MetaMask or so on, and just pass the signer to get the SDK, and you will receive the SDK, and all the functions or the methods on the contracts will be available over there. So as can you see here, the SDK.dai, it prompts us that there's a transfer function, and also really briefly, you can see that the transfer also accepts destination and how much DAI you want to send to some address. And this is easy as it. You can just use it out of the box, and there's nothing more to it. And as mentioned also before, we can use also other networks. We are not tied to the mainnet, but in this configuration file, you can use also different already predefined networks listed over here. But if you cannot see the network that you want to connect, you can also add your own networks. But you will need to also provide a link to Etherscan, so the tool can get the ABIs for you. All right, so it looks so simple, but hey, you might ask, what happens, for example, if I don't know, managing or opening maker vaults managed by the proxies? Yeah, it would be a great question, because this is exactly what we're doing in the maker, in the Oasis. Sorry. But let's first look look what the proxies actually are. So the proxy would be a smart contract that is owned by the user and can execute some code on the blockchain that you actually provide. And Maker provided this really user-friendly and easy-to-use proxy actions. So instead of calling all the internal Maker contracts, you can just make one call, for example, to open. As you can see on the presentation, there's open action, which will create everything for you. So the proxy actions actually hides all the complexity of the Maker protocol. And thanks to that, you can just easily, for example, open vaults, deposit collateral, generate that, and so on, so on. And let's see how it will look like to open the Maker vault using if SDK. It's gonna be only 12 lines, so it's really nice that you can do so much with so little code. So the first three lines you can see here, this is what we already seen. This is only to create the SDK. In the next step, as we already discussed, there's gonna be, we need to get the proxy for the user. And for that, we will use the proxy registry. We added it already to the configuration file. And there's a method proxy. You just send the address and you will receive the proxy address for a user. And in this case, we already assume that user has a proxy. If he didn't have, we can use the proxy registry to build a proxy for the user. And everything will be on the proxy registry because it's already fully typed. All right, so let's go to the next part. You can see we're over here, we're using proxy actions, but the one difference is that we are not actually sending a transaction to proxy actions. We are just creating a transaction object. So you can see that proxy actions populate transaction. The method is open, and it's also already fully typed. The first argument is a manager. It's just some contract that stores the IDs of the vaults. Then we want to send which type of vault we want to open. And the last thing is the user proxy, where for whom the vault needs to be open. And as mentioned, it's not making a transaction, it's just preparing a transaction object for that. Another line is we're using the SDK proxy. And in this case, we need to change the address of this proxy, because in the fourth line, we got the user proxy address. And now we need to attach this proxy contract to the new address that we found out. And we will get the proxy contract. And this is actual user that is connected proxy contract. And in the if, we can see that we are actually making a call to proxy contract execute, and we're sending address where it should be executed and the bytes. It is call data from the transaction. And you can see in this short example, we've managed to open the vault for the maker on the maker. Yeah. And let's see which library is actually behind all this magic of the if SDK. And it was already mentioned that it's called type chain. And I really loved the motivation behind the type chain that I found on the README of this project, that the interacting with blockchain in JavaScript is a pain. Developers need to remember not only a name of a given smart contract, method, or event, but also full signature This wastes time and might introduce bugs that will be triggered only in the runtime. Type change solves those problems as long as you use TypeScript. So as we can see, this library is in heart has this mission to make developer experience of dApps even better. And you might ask, why should we use type chain instead of, for example, the if SDK, which is much more easier? For example, we are using type chain in Oasis instead of the if SDK, and the reason behind is it gives you more power. So instead of being tied to ethers5, you can use other targets. In Oasis, we are using Web3, but for example, also when you are developing smart contracts, you can make the this library type chain work together with your hard hat. So whenever you compile your smart contracts, it will automatically generate types for you, and then you can use it in your dApp. So you don't have to deploy it to some network and post the ABI. It's more complex, but it also gives you more power. And on the next slide, I would like to show you how the use case in our Oasis app. So over here, as I mentioned, we're not using if SDK, but purely a type chain. And type chain generated for us this type DSS proxy actions. And you can see right here that thanks to that, we get the method. And we can see that on this proxy action, there's a method called open log if and draw. This method actually opens the maker vault, logs your if and draw that. And in the prompt, you can see that it accepts a handful of parameters. And it would be really easy to just mix up, because first four are just addresses, and you might, for example, I don't know, misplace them, and you will just figure out that something's wrong when actually making a transaction. And right here, you can just compare it and see that, all right, everything's all right. So it gives you additional safety in your IDE. And I think we will be wrapping up this presentation. And the main takeaways that I would like you to take after this presentation is that we really need a better developer experience of our apps to really keep up with the pace of DeFi, and remember to be lazy and generate whatever can be generated instead of type it. All right. So thank you very much, and please check out our application. I think you're muted.
I'm muted again. Classic story. Damian, thank you so much for your time and for the presentation. I see AJ Holmes in the chat. AJ, if you have a question, what's the moment to ask? Yeah, and Alex, also thank you so much for your presentation. It was a pleasure to have you. And yeah, always happy to see another Polish developer, Damian.
All right, see you in Warsaw.
Yeah, hope
After
to see
lockdown.
I hope it's not gonna wait too long. Yeah, AJ Holmes is asking about the career link in the chat, but so yeah, I'm just gonna post it right here.
I don't know if I can post messages over there. I think I need to.
Don't worry, I just handle it. Yeah, again, Damian, thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you in Warsaw. And thank you everybody for watching. I'll see you next month on the second Tuesday of the month, as always.
Right.
See you guys.
Bye.